Hi everyone! A question that I get asked a lot is, Holly, how do you read so much? I think that's a fair question, so I'm here today with my top tips on how to read more. Tip number 1, audiobooks. It should come as no surprise that this is my number 1 tip. I love audiobooks. I listen to them when I'm driving, when I'm walking, on the tube, when I'm cleaning or ironing, or even doing my design work. I think you'd be surprised by how much time there is during the day when your brain isn't really doing much else. Audiobooks are a fantastic way to economise your time and make those mundane tasks much more exciting. Tip number 2, when you're listening to audiobooks, speed up the narration. This has been an absolute lifesaver for me. I use the Audible app to listen to my audiobooks, and that gives you the option of listening at 1.25 speed, 1.5 speed, 2 times speed, 2.5 speed, and 3 times speed. Honestly, when I found this out, it was like being handed a time turner. I listen to most of my audiobooks at 3 speed now, but it can take a bit of time to get used to that. I would suggest starting with 1.5 speed, and the added bonus of this is that if you have a narrator who slightly gets on your nerves, I find that speeding it up actually irons out some of those odd inflections. Bonus tip, you can also do this with YouTube videos under the little settings cog. Tip number 3, read multiple books at once. It is not unusual for me to be reading 8 books at a time. If you're just branching out into book polygamy, I would suggest making sure that all of the books you're reading are quite different, otherwise it could get quite confusing. I tend to have at least 1 short story collection on the go, at least 1 novel, 1 audiobook, and 1 non-fiction. At the moment I have 3 non-fiction books on the go, all on different topics, 2 short story collections, and a novel. Sometimes you're just not in the mood for reading 1 book, so it's good to have a variety to choose from. I also find that it's quite good to have different books for different times, so I'll have 1 book that I'm reading before bed, I'll have another book that I read on public transport. And that brings me to tip number 4, which is to read across platforms. At least one of the books that I'm reading will be an audiobook. Usually I'll have a larger scale book on the go, which might be a graphic design book. It's usually non-fiction. Then I'll have a fairly standard sized book on the go, and I'll also have a book or 2 that I'm reading on my phone. I don't read on a Kindle, but I will sometimes read things on my phone, and I find it's quite good to have maybe an essay collection on the go, so that if you're waiting in a supermarket queue, for instance, you can whip out your phone and read some of an essay. It just means that you are never without a book. And there's a great range of apps that you can use to read on, and there are lots of classics that are available to download for free. Tip number 5 is to switch off from technology. I find that if I sit down to read and have my phone sitting next to me, I will inevitably get distracted. Moving into another room away from your laptop, away from mobile devices, is a great way to avoid distraction. If you're reading on a phone or an e-reader where there are other distractions on there, I would suggest turning off the Wi-Fi. Tip number 6 is make time for reading. If reading something that you're serious about and you want to do more of, then try setting aside an extra half an hour before bed. It's a great way to wind down and help you to sleep, and it also gets you away from that bluish light of a screen. I like to dedicate any travel time that I have to reading, either in audiobook form or as a physical book. And the final tip, tip number 7, is to read books that you love. If you want to be motivated to read, then you have to be reading things that you're enjoying. If you like reading crime thrillers, then read crime thrillers. If you like reading fantasy, read fantasy. I do believe that diversifying your reading and reading from lots of different genres and different backgrounds is really valuable, but if you're reading a book that you're really not enjoying, then don't do it, because life is just too short. That also comes back to having multiple things on the go. Then you can read things that you're really in the mood to read at that time. So there we have it. Those are my top tips for reading more books. If you have any more tips to add, then please put them in the comments. I'd be really fascinated to know what you do to read more books. As always, thank you very much for watching, and I'll see you next time. Bye!